They paid me to keep quiet about the creature behind Nicki Minaj's MTV performance. And for years, I did just that. Kept my mouth shut, pretended like nothing happened. But I can't anymore. What I saw that night wasn't part of the performance. It wasn't some special effect or a stunt. It was real. And it's been haunting me ever since. I've never been able to forget the way it looked, the way it moved, like it was waiting for its moment. And when it finally stepped into the spotlight, no one saw it, except for me. I'm not someone who's used to being in the public eye. I'm one of the invisible crew members, the ones who work tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure everything goes smoothly, but are rarely noticed when it's all over. My job is simple, or at least that's how it seems from the outside. I make sure the lights are right, the sound is perfect, and the props are set just so. No applause for me, no credit in the program. I don't stand next to the performers when they take their bow, but without me and my team, nothing would work. We're the unsung heroes of every show, the backbone that holds everything up. But this wasn't just another gig. It was Nicki Minaj. The Nicki Minaj, the queen of rap, the one who commanded every stage she graced. At that point in 2019, she was a global icon, a force in the music world. Everywhere she went, eyes were on her, and the anticipation around her performances was palpable. I was just another guy in the crowd, another crew member trying to do his part, but this time, the weight of the event felt heavier. It wasn't just a job. This was history in the making.
The MTV performance was a big deal, especially for someone like Nicki, who had amassed millions of fans around the world. Her fans weren't just loyal, they were devoted. The pressure for her to perform flawlessly was immense. The stakes were high, and every single detail had to be perfect. I could feel it as soon as I walked into the venue. The crew was everywhere, scrambling to make sure everything was in place. Lights had to be just right. Cables had to be neatly tucked away. The sound system had to be perfect. Every inch of the stage was scrutinized, and the pressure to deliver something flawless was weighing on all of us.
As the crew went into overdrive, I was just doing my usual thing, making sure everything was running smoothly. But there was something about that night, something that didn't sit right with me. It wasn't just nerves. I had worked countless high-profile gigs before, but none of them felt like this. There was a strange unease in the air, a sense of something hovering just out of sight. It was hard to explain. I kept thinking it was just the stress of the job, the exhaustion of working late nights leading up to this moment, but something about the atmosphere felt off. And I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't just preparing for a performance. It felt like we were preparing for something bigger, something we weren't supposed to know. Nicki, she was different that night too. It wasn't obvious at first, but as I kept catching glimpses of her, I noticed something in her eyes. There was a distance, a disconnect. Something wasn't quite right. At first I thought it was just my imagination, or maybe she was just nervous. It had to be that, right? After all, she was about to perform in front of millions of people, her fans, the media, the world. The pressure on her must have been overwhelming. But still, there was something unsettling about her. The usual fire in her eyes, the energy that usually radiated from her was missing. It was like she wasn't fully there, like part of her had checked out. She was going through the motions, but it felt mechanical,
like she was on autopilot. It wasn't like the Nicki I'd seen in rehearsals, confident, sharp, in control. No, this was different. There was an emptiness behind her gaze, something that sent a shiver down my spine every time I caught her eye.
I didn't want to make too much of it. She was probably just stressed, just like the rest of us. I told myself I was overthinking it. I convinced myself it was just the weight of the performance getting to me. Maybe I was projecting my own anxiety onto her. But even as I tried to shake it off, I couldn't deny the feeling in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just the usual pre-performance jitters. It was something darker, something beneath the surface that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Backstage, the crew was buzzing with nervous energy. We were all getting into position, preparing for the show to start. I took my place near the side of the stage, making sure everything was set for the performance to begin. The countdown had already started. Nicki's fans were chanting her name from the stands, and the energy in the arena was building. You could feel the excitement in the air, the anticipation that hung heavy, like a storm waiting to break. Everything was supposed to be perfect. We had rehearsed every detail, every cue, every light change. The set was flawless. The sound was flawless. Everything had been double-checked, triple-checked, and rechecked. It had to be perfect. There was no room for error. But still, that feeling persisted. That uneasy, nagging sensation that something wasn't right. I brushed it off, told myself it was just the pressure of the moment. After all, who wouldn't be nervous with the world watching? But as I looked out at the crowd, watching them cheer and clap, something gnawed at me. The way they screamed her name, the way the cameras flashed, the way everything seemed to be building towards something. It felt like the show wasn't just about Nicki anymore. It felt like something else was coming, something we hadn't prepared for.
Nicki was backstage now, the countdown ticking down. The crew was in position. Everything was ready. I could hear the rumble of the crowd growing louder as the lights dimmed. The performance was about to begin, but as I stood there, waiting for my cue, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go horribly wrong. Then, without warning, the atmosphere changed. It was subtle at first, just a shift in the air, like a breeze that had gone still. But as the seconds passed, it became more palpable. The temperature in the room seemed to drop, and the hum of the backstage equipment started to distort. The lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows across the walls. And Nicki? She was still in the dressing room, but something about her presence, something about the way the crew was moving, had shifted. It wasn't just the lights or the equipment or the sound, it was everything. The whole atmosphere had changed, like we were on the verge of something we couldn't control. Something was about to happen, and we had no idea what it was, but I could feel it. We all could. The crew was tense, restless. Everyone was just waiting for the show to begin, but it was like we were waiting for something else. Nicki's name echoed from the crowd. The lights went down, and then it began. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about that strange feeling, that unease. Something was lurking, waiting to make itself known. Something we weren't ready for, something that wasn't part of the plan. And it wasn't just the nerves. It was something else, something darker. But then, the mirror.
It was just a part of the set, nothing too extraordinary. It was placed off to the side, a large, decorative piece. I'd seen it during rehearsals,
But that night, something about it seemed strange, like it didn't belong there, like it was more than just a prop. It stood in a corner of the stage, catching the light at the oddest angles. It wasn't just reflecting the set, it was reflecting something else. As Nicki prepared to go on stage, I looked over at the mirror once more, and I felt it, this sudden gnawing chill in the air. I told myself it was just the nerves, the cold backstage air, but that feeling wasn't normal. I had been in this business for years. I knew when something was off, and I couldn't deny the cold shiver crawling down my spine. At first I thought it was just the lighting, but then it happened again. The mirror reflected Nicki, sure, but then it didn't. There was something in the reflection, just standing there, out of place. It was like the mirror wasn't reflecting the world we were in at all. It wasn't a simple reflection, it was a distortion. I stared at the mirror, my eyes glued to the surface. It wasn't just a visual trick. The shape in the reflection wasn't right. It wasn't a person. There was something about it, something wrong. The figure was too tall, too thin, with limbs that didn't seem to move right. It stood perfectly still at first, and then it shifted, almost as if it were reacting to me staring at it. I could feel my breath catch in my chest. I wasn't imagining it. The reflection of Nicki wasn't just her. Her eyes weren't in the same place. Her posture was slightly different. Her reflection seemed empty, lifeless. I tried to convince myself it was just the angle of the mirror, the way the lights were hitting it, but I couldn't shake the sensation. There was something alive behind that glass. And then, as if in slow motion, I saw it move. I blinked hard, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. I had been awake for hours, prepping everything for the show, but I wasn't hallucinating. There it was, moving in the reflection. The figure. It reached out, its hands long and twisted, and for a split second, I swear it looked right at me. There was no mistaking it. Something was in that mirror, and it wasn't supposed to be. I turned around quickly, my heart pounding. I glanced at the crew, the dancers, everyone getting into position, and no one seemed to notice. They were all going about their business, setting up their spots, checking cues, but no one was acknowledging what I was seeing. I turned back to the mirror. It was still there, watching me. I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot. My mind was racing, but my body didn't respond. I felt like I was trapped in the moment. The thing in the mirror wasn't real. I told myself that over and over, but I knew, deep down, it wasn't true. And then the music started. Nicki hit the stage, and the performance began. The crowd went wild. The whole arena lit up with her presence, her power, her energy. But me, I couldn't take my eyes off the mirror. The figure was still there, still watching. And now, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The whole performance was happening, but in the reflection, things were different. The atmosphere was darker, the shadows longer. The creature in the mirror seemed to grow with the rhythm of the show, like it was feeding off the energy. But that was just the beginning. The performance was drawing closer. The energy backstage was electric, but underneath it, there was something off. I couldn't shake the feeling, no matter how much I tried to focus on the task at hand. I had been backstage for years, working with performers of all kinds, but something about this night, it was different. It wasn't just the pressure of the performance or the usual pre-show jitters. It was the room, the mirror, and the air.
I had been preparing for hours, making sure everything was in place, adjusting the lights one last time, checking sound levels. The team was moving fast, and I kept to my work, trying to ignore the unsettling weight in the air. Everyone was busy with their own responsibilities, but there was something in the background that I couldn't ignore. Nicki was still in her dressing room, and I noticed her crew lingering nearby. The usual buzz of laughter and chatter from the crew seemed a little too forced that night. I glanced around, watching the faces around me, staff, dancers, other crew members, and there was something about the way they looked at each other, a quiet unease in their eyes, but they didn't talk about it. Everyone was focused, yes, but there was an underlying tension I couldn't ignore. I stepped outside to take a breather. The hallway was quieter than it should have been. The usual sounds from the arena were muffled, as if the walls were absorbing the noise. I pulled out my phone, checking messages, but nothing seemed to distract me from the strange feeling creeping up on me again. I couldn't shake it. The coldness, the feeling that something was just waiting. As I walked back into the building, I passed by a few crew members standing off to the side, talking in low voices. As soon as they saw me, they stopped. Not in a subtle way, more like they were suddenly aware of me. One of them, a guy I didn't recognize, looked me up and down for a beat too long before turning away. He didn't say anything, but there was something off in the way he looked at me, like he knew something I didn't. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just nerves, that everyone was a little on edge, but I couldn't forget the look in his eyes. When I entered Nicki's dressing room again, it was different. It wasn't just the silence, there was a heaviness in the air, like it had been waiting for me. It was hard to explain. The room itself felt like it had shifted, but it wasn't in a way that I could pin down. It wasn't the furniture or the props or the lights. It was the space itself. I glanced around, but nothing looked out of place. Still, I couldn't shake the sensation that something was wrong. I looked toward the mirror again, and there it was. Just a split-second flicker. I couldn't tell if it was just the way the light was hitting it, or if I was imagining it, but it looked like the reflection shifted slightly. The edges of the room, the light, the shadows, it felt like they didn't quite fit. It wasn't an illusion. It was more like the mirror had become a window to somewhere else. I shook my head, trying to snap myself out of it. This wasn't the time to get paranoid. The performance was about to start. I had to get it together. Nicki walked in, breaking my train of thought. She looked just as she always did, confident, poised, ready for the stage. But there was something different in her eyes, too. They were vacant, a little too distant. She didn't seem like herself. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Everything's good?" she asked, her voice light and upbeat, but it felt rehearsed, too rehearsed, like she was forcing it. She glanced around the room, eyes flicking over the same things she had seen 100 times before, but it felt like she was looking through them, like she wasn't fully there. "Yeah, all set," I said, trying to sound reassuring, but even I wasn't buying it. "Just need you to check the mic one last time, and we're good to go." She nodded, but when she stepped toward the mic, something about the way she moved was off, slow, deliberate, like her body was moving on its own, without her usual fluidity. I caught myself watching her too closely, wondering if maybe I was imagining things. As she adjusted the mic, I noticed something else, her hand. It wasn't shaking, but it was stiff, rigid, like she was fighting to control it. I couldn't help but wonder if something was wrong. Maybe she was exhausted from the pressure of the show. Maybe I was just reading too much into it. But there was a quiet urgency in the air now, an edge that hadn't been there before.
A knock at the door broke the moment. I quickly moved to answer it, pushing the creeping sense of unease aside. It was just another crew member, a guy who had been working on the lighting. He gave me a nervous smile, but when he saw Nicki, his expression changed. His eyes darted to the corner of the room, the mirror, and then back to Nicki. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there for a moment, almost like he was waiting for something.
"Everything all right?" I asked, trying to keep the situation calm. His hesitation was too long, and it didn't sit right with me. When he spoke, his voice was tight. "Yeah, just checking on the lights," he muttered, avoiding eye contact with me and Nicki both. He stepped back quickly, as if trying to distance himself from whatever was hanging in the air. But before he left, his gaze shot back to the mirror once more. I noticed it then, the way his eyes lingered on it just for a moment. And then, without another word, he was gone. But that moment, that look, stuck with me. There was something wrong with the mirror. I knew it, but no one would say anything. Everyone acted like everything was fine. They smiled, nodded, and carried on like this was just another show. But I knew. Deep down, I knew it wasn't. Nicki finished checking the mic and turned to me, flashing that same strained smile. "All set," she said again. But this time, it felt empty. She walked toward the door, but I caught a glimpse of her eyes before she stepped out. For a split second, they were dark, vacant. She wasn't herself. I could see it in her eyes. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't. I couldn't put my finger on it. Everything was happening too fast, and I wasn't sure if I was just imagining it, or if something deeper was going on. But as she left, the door clicked shut behind her, and for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of the performance bearing down on me. It was something else. Something darker that I couldn't understand. Something I wasn't supposed to see. But that was only the start. What happened next would make everything I'd seen feel like nothing. The hours before the performance were a blur. The crew moved like clockwork, everyone with a role to play, each of us focused on getting Nicki Minaj onto the stage and the show running smoothly. Yet, in the back of my mind, that feeling, the one I couldn't shake, no matter how many times I tried to ignore it, continued to grow. I felt like I was waiting for something, but I couldn't tell what. The pressure backstage was growing, but this wasn't the usual backstage tension. It was something more, something darker. The set was ready. The lights were in place. The crowd was already roaring in anticipation, but none of it mattered. I couldn't stop thinking about the mirror and Nicki and the way everything felt off. She had gone through the motions like she always did, but I couldn't ignore how distant she was, how empty her presence felt. It wasn't like the usual confidence she exuded. It was like she was a part of the performance, but not really there, like she was being moved along by something else. I could see it in the way she moved, in the way she avoided direct eye contact with anyone for too long. There was something not quite right with her. And then there was the mirror. I tried to push it out of my head. focusing on the usual tasks, checking the microphones, making sure the dancers were ready, checking lighting cues. But the mirror was always there, standing silently in the corner. Every time I glanced at it, the reflection of the room didn't seem to match what I saw in front of me. The shadows looked wrong, stretched and shifting. It was as though something was pulling at the edges of reality itself, just beyond the surface. I felt a nervous, tightening knot in my stomach, a pressure building in the air that I couldn't explain. It wasn't until I stepped away from the stage, ready to check on a few last-minute things before the performance started, that I realized how bad things were getting. I stood in the hallway for a moment, just taking a breath. The sounds of the crowd, the distant hum of anticipation from the audience seemed far away now. I was alone. Alone, but not really alone. The stillness in the air was suffocating, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, that I was being watched. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps coming down the hallway. I turned, expecting it to be someone from the crew, maybe a PA running to get a last-minute piece of equipment. But when I saw who it was, my heart skipped a beat. It was the man. The same man I'd seen earlier in the rehearsal, the one who gave me that unsettling look. He was walking toward me with the same expressionless face, the same cold gaze. "Everything okay?" I asked, forcing myself to sound casual. The words felt hollow as they left my mouth, as if I was already trying to convince myself of something. The man didn't answer right away. He just kept walking toward me, his eyes never leaving mine. He was tall, with dark, almost too black eyes that seemed too intense to be natural. But his expression didn't change. It was like he was looking through me, like he could see something I couldn't. Like I was just another obstacle in his way. "Doja is ready," he said, his voice flat. Not a question, a statement. I nodded, unsure of what to say. "Yeah, she's in her dressing room. Everything's good to go." He stopped a few feet away from me, his gaze flicking briefly to the mirror in the corner of the hallway, then back to me. "I saw it too," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. His words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I stared at him, trying to process what he meant. "Saw what?" I asked, my voice shaky. He didn't answer immediately, just stood there for a moment, staring at me as if deciding whether or not he should say anything more. Then, his lips barely moved as he spoke again, each word deliberate and cold. "The creature. It's here." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to respond. His words made no sense. They couldn't make sense. But there he was, standing right in front of me, saying those words like they were the most casual thing in the world. Before I could say anything, he turned and walked past me, his footsteps fading down the hall. I watched him go, my body frozen in place, my mind racing. The creature? What was he talking about? What creature? I glanced at the mirror again. I don't know why, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. The moment I did, something caught my attention. The reflection of the hallway looked wrong. The colors and the shadows, they didn't match the real hallway in front of me. There was something off about the way the light bent around the corner. And then I saw it. A figure. It wasn't in the real hallway, but it was in the mirror. There, standing at the end of the hall, just out of view. But in the reflection, it was clear. A tall, gaunt figure, standing motionless, facing the mirror. I couldn't make out its features, but I could see its shape. Wrong. Too thin. Limbs too long. It was wrong. I stepped back, heart racing. The reflection stayed still, but I couldn't take my eyes off it. The hallway behind me seemed to twist, pulling me toward the mirror. I felt like I was being dragged into it. I shook my head, trying to pull myself together. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. But when I turned around to look down the hallway, there was nothing. No figure, no shadow. Just the empty hall. But in the mirror, it was still there, standing at the end of the hallway, just watching. I could feel its presence like a weight, heavy and suffocating. It wasn't right. I didn't know what it was, but I could feel it. It wasn't human. I turned away from the mirror, my breath quickening. My hands were shaking as I tried to get control of myself. The sound of the crowd grew louder, the rumble of their cheers making its way backstage. Nicki was ready. The show was about to begin. But in that moment, none of it mattered. The creature, the thing in the mirror. I couldn't focus on anything else. Then came the real shock. The moment I heard it, the low, guttural sound of something scraping. I turned, my body frozen. The sound wasn't coming from behind me. It was coming from inside the mirror, like claws dragging across glass. I stepped forward slowly, my legs barely carrying me. The noise grew louder, sharper. It sounded like something was trying to get through, trying to break into the world beyond the mirror. And just as I reached out to touch the glass, the figure in the reflection moved. It turned its head slowly, deliberately, its eyes, if they could even be called eyes, locking onto me. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just seeing the reflection. I wasn't looking at the same reality anymore. It was pulling me in. It was calling to me. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. What came next would break everything wide open. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my body locked in a vice of fear. The mirror, that damn mirror, felt like it had a life of its own. It wasn't just a reflection. It was something far worse. The thing that stared back at me wasn't entirely human. Its body was distorted, twisted in ways that defied logic. Its limbs were too long, unnaturally so, like a grotesque mockery of a human form. Every angle was wrong. The way it bent, the way it shifted. It was wrong, so wrong. But it wasn't just its appearance that terrified me. It was the feeling that seeped into my bones. The way it made the air feel thick, heavy, like I was choking on it. Every instinct screamed for me to run, to look away, to break the unholy connection between us. But my body didn't listen. I was frozen, completely paralyzed. My eyes refused to leave the mirror, as though some invisible force had them locked in place. It felt like I wasn't even in control anymore. Like whatever this thing was, it was holding me hostage, stealing my breath, and slowly suffocating me. The room around me seemed to shift, to distort in a way that made my head spin. The edges of reality, the very fabric of what I knew, started to tear. It was like the world itself was being warped by the presence of whatever was in that mirror. I could feel the change deep within me. Something primal, something ancient clawing at the back of my mind. The air grew heavier, harder to breathe, and I could feel the pressure building in my chest. I felt trapped in that moment, trapped in that mirror. with no way out. And then the sound started. At first, it was faint, a slight scraping noise that tickled at the edges of my awareness. But as I stood there, helpless, it grew louder, more insistent. It started to claw at my sanity, dragging its jagged, skeletal fingers across my mind. It was like claws on glass, a screeching, gnawing noise that reverberated through my skull. It felt as though the sound was coming from inside my head, scratching its way through my thoughts, tearing at my very essence. I could feel it now, in every nerve ending, in every cell of my body. There was no escape from the noise, no way to block it out. I stumbled backward, heart hammering in my chest. My body was fighting me, trying to move, trying to flee, but my feet wouldn't obey. It was as if they were glued to the floor, as though I had no power over them. I was stuck, rooted in place, my body betraying me as my mind screamed for release. The world around me spun and wavered, the edges of the room bending and twisting, blurring into something that made no sense. The very air around me thickened, swirling with an oppressive weight that made it hard to breathe, hard to think. It was as though I was drowning, sinking deeper into a sea of dread.
Still, my gaze never wavered. I couldn't look away, no matter how much I wanted to. I felt like I was being pulled into the mirror, like it was calling to me, urging me to come closer. But I didn't move. I couldn't. My legs were shaking. But my eyes, they stayed locked on the reflection. And that's when it started to move. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but no, the thing in the mirror was shifting. Not walking, not moving in any way that made sense, but slithering, dragging itself forward, its form twisting and contorting.
It wasn't getting closer in the physical sense, not in the way I expected. It was closer in another way, a way that made my skin crawl, a way that sent waves of nausea crashing through me. It was closing in on me mentally, emotionally. I could feel it inside my mind, pushing, stretching its influence. It was reaching for me, like it was trying to touch me, but without ever moving an inch.
The lights above flickered erratically, buzzing in time with the now distorted hum of the backstage equipment. It felt like the entire world was warping, bending to the will of whatever this thing was. The walls seemed to move. The ceiling was too low. The floor was too far away. And nothing was where it should be. And that scraping noise, it wasn't just in my head anymore. It was everywhere. But then, it did something that I will never forget. The thing in the reflection, that twisted, horrifying form, did something that made my blood run cold. It smiled, not in the way a person would smile. It wasn't the kind of smile I'd seen on Nicki's face or anyone else's. No, this smile was stretched too wide, too unnaturally, with sharp, jagged teeth that gleamed in the low light. It was a grotesque mockery of a smile, and when I saw it, a wave of dread rushed over me. I could feel my chest tightening, my breath getting shorter as though the very air had become poisonous.
I opened my mouth to scream, but the sound caught in my throat, strangled. My heart raced, and I felt the world begin to tilt, as if the room was no longer standing on solid ground. The figure in the mirror, it wasn't just a reflection anymore. It was real. I could feel it. I could sense it. There was no denying it now. The thing wasn't just looking at me from the mirror. It was looking through me. It knew me. It knew everything about me. My eyes were wide with fear as I struggled to breathe. But the more I fought it, the harder it became to stay grounded, I could feel my mind starting to crack under the pressure, under the weight of something I couldn't understand. The figure in the mirror wasn't just moving anymore. It was reaching out. Its long fingers stretched toward me, pulling me in, dragging me closer to the surface of the glass. I could feel the coldness of its touch, even though I wasn't physically touching it. It was in my bones, in my soul, sinking deeper into me with every passing second. I wanted to run. I wanted to escape, but I couldn't. I was trapped, caught between the reality of the world I knew and the nightmare unfolding in the reflection. My mind couldn't hold on any longer. It was slipping, crumbling under the weight of the creature's presence. The smile stretched wider. I could hear the low, guttural voice again. Only this time, it wasn't just inside my head. It was coming from everywhere, around me, inside me, suffocating me. The voice was familiar. It wasn't speaking a language I understood, but I knew what it was saying. I didn't need to hear the words to understand it. I could feel it. "You shouldn't have looked," it said. The words were like a whisper, but they were loud in my mind. They tore through my thoughts like a knife, dragging everything else out. Don't look. Don't listen. Don't know. I could feel the creature pulling me closer, tugging at me with an invisible force. My body was no longer my own. I was slipping into the mirror. My body, my consciousness, it was being consumed, being replaced by this thing. I felt the coldness of its presence settle into my veins, wrapping around my heart, making it beat slower, weaker. I wasn't sure if I was still breathing. I wasn't sure if I was still alive. I tried to look away. I forced my eyes to the floor, tried to break free, but the creature's presence pressed against me, inside my mind, inside my thoughts. I could see it in my peripheral vision, its fingers coming closer, reaching for me. The smile, it was still there, stretching wide, too wide, its jagged teeth glistening in the dark. And then I saw something else. In the reflection behind the creature, there was another figure. It was blurry at first, but as my eyes focused, I could see it clearly. A person. Nicki. But it wasn't the Nicki I knew. This version of her was different. Her eyes were hollow, her face expressionless. She wasn't her. She was standing there, just outside the creature's reach, like she was trapped behind it. I reached out, desperate for some connection to reality, desperate for something to pull me out of this nightmare, but I couldn't touch her. She was unreachable. And the creature, I could feel it growing stronger. It was feeding off my fear. The reflection started to distort again. Nicki's figure in the mirror seemed to flicker, shifting from one version of herself to another. Her eyes empty, dark as the void, hollow and cold, locked onto me. And then, in the corner of the mirror, I saw something else. Something worse. A third figure. A shadowy shape that was watching everything unfold. Its form was too vague, too indistinct, but it was there, watching, waiting. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout, to beg for someone to help, but the words wouldn't come. The voice in my head, the one that wasn't Nicki, the one that wasn't me, commanded me to stay still, to stay quiet. And then came the real shock. The mirror began to crack. I heard the sound first, a deep rumbling crack, like the world itself was splitting in two. I felt it in the air, like the room itself was shaking, vibrating, splintering. The glass began to ripple, the cracks spreading across the surface like veins of ice. The creature reached out to me one last time, its fingers extending toward my face, its smile growing as the glass fractured around it. It was coming through, and that's when everything changed. The world around me seemed to slow down the moment the glass cracked. I could hear it, each fracture, each jagged break, echoing like thunder in my ears. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, my feet rooted to the ground as the mirror continued to split open before me, the sound of the cracking glass slicing through the air. Each second that passed felt like an eternity, as if time itself had stopped, waiting for something. I could feel the creature pulling at the edges of the mirror, its twisted skeletal fingers reaching for me. It was closer now, closer than ever before, and I could feel its presence like it was inside me, crawling beneath my skin. The weight of it was unbearable. My chest was tight, my breath shallow, and I couldn't focus on anything except the thing in front of me. The thing that wasn't supposed to exist. I tried to scream. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I wanted to run. I needed to run, but my body wouldn't respond. It was like I was trapped in my own skin, unable to escape. The air felt thick, suffocating, pressing in on me from all sides. My thoughts were racing, but none of them made sense. I couldn't understand what was happening. I didn't want to understand. The mirror, the reflection, was no longer just a window into another world. It was a doorway, a rift, and whatever was on the other side wasn't waiting anymore. It was coming through, breaking into this world, and I was caught in the middle of it. I felt a tug at the back of my mind, a strange, magnetic pull that made me want to step closer to the mirror. I fought it, but the pull was strong, stronger than anything I had ever felt. The air around me vibrated, humming with an unnatural energy, and the creature's fingers, their long, bony tips, finally breached the surface of the mirror. My breath caught in my throat as I watched the creature crawl through the broken glass, its body shifting in unnatural ways. It wasn't walking. It was slithering, sliding toward me, its limbs contorting, stretching in ways that made my stomach turn. Its eyes, those eyes, were still empty, dark voids that seemed to absorb all the light around them. I could feel it. I could feel its gaze boring into me, searching me, like it was looking for something it couldn't find. I wanted to run, to escape, but my legs wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, unable to look away as the creature pulled itself farther into the room. The glass around it continued to fracture, cracking further with every movement, until the mirror was no longer just a reflection of the room. It was a hole into something else. It took a step toward me. No, not a step. It was more like it drifted, its body gliding unnaturally toward me. I could feel the air grow colder with each inch it moved, the temperature plummeting so fast that I could see my breath in the air. My heart pounded in my chest, and I finally managed to force my legs to move, stumbling backward, but it wasn't fast enough. The creature's arm shot out toward me, its fingers stretching, growing longer, reaching for me like they were going to pull me into the mirror with it. The last ounce of strength I had left surged through me, and I managed to throw myself out of its reach, slamming into the wall beside the mirror. My back hit the cold, unforgiving surface, and I sank to the floor, my body trembling, barely able to keep my head above water in the ocean of fear that had enveloped me. I couldn't breathe. The creature's presence was suffocating, pressing in on me from all sides. I could still feel its fingers, its gaze, its pull. I was stuck, trapped in this nightmare, unable to escape. And then, just as quickly as it had started, everything stopped. The mirror stopped cracking. The creature stopped moving. For a moment, the room was silent. Too silent. I dared to look up. The reflection in the mirror was still there, still holding the form of the creature, but it wasn't moving. It was frozen, like a shadow trapped in the glass, waiting for something. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to feel. My body was numb, my mind reeling from what had just happened. I was shaken, broken. I didn't know how long I had been on the floor, trembling, but I knew I couldn't stay there much longer. My instinct screamed at me to run, to get as far away from the mirror as possible, but I couldn't move. My muscles were locked in place, my body refusing to cooperate. I could hear my heart pounding, beating in my ears. The door suddenly slammed open behind me. I jumped, spinning around, expecting someone from the crew. I don't know who I was expecting, maybe someone to help me, to explain this madness. But when I saw who it was, my blood ran cold. It was the man, the one who had warned me about the creature. His eyes were cold, but there was something different about him this time. His expression wasn't just blank, it was empty. He wasn't human anymore, not entirely. "What did you see?" he asked, his voice hollow, distant, like he wasn't really there. He stepped into the room, his gaze immediately going to the mirror. His face didn't shift, but I could see something in his eyes, something that didn't belong. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My throat was tight, my mind clouded with fear. I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't know how to tell him what had happened. "What did you see?" he asked again, his voice more insistent, almost as if he was forcing the answer from me. "Please," I choked out, my voice breaking. "I need to get out of here." The man stepped closer, his movements slow, deliberate. "It's too late," he said, almost pityingly. "You can't leave now. You're already part of it." The air around me grew heavier, the weight of his words sinking in, choking me. "What do you mean?" I gasped, barely able to breathe. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned to the mirror, his gaze lingering on the fractured glass. He stood there for a moment, just staring, before slowly reaching out toward it. I wanted to scream at him to stop. I wanted to grab his arm and pull him away, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, unable to react. But he didn't touch the mirror. He passed through it. It was like watching a dream unfold. His body seemed to melt into the glass, his form distorting as he slipped through the rift, vanishing into the reflection. And just like that, the world around me snapped back into focus. The weight in the air lifted. The mirror cracked once more, just a single sharp sound, and then, like nothing had ever happened, it was over. The creature, the mirror, the man, gone. But my heart still pounded in my chest. I was shaking uncontrollably. It wasn't over. It had only just begun. But what happened next took things to a whole new level. I thought I was free. I thought once I walked away, once I left that room behind, it would all be over. But the thing in the mirror, the creature, it doesn't leave you. It's still here in the dark corners of my mind, waiting for the right moment to step back into my reality. I can feel it, watching, always lurking. And I know it's only a matter of time before it finds me again.